and we've got 2 upcoming events. So we'll see you there as well. So we're going to talk about assessing teams in the classroom. So not from the perspective of industry, but really from the perspective of your classroom teams. And I'm primarily focusing on undergraduate, but it works well for graduate classes. So what we're talking about today will be for all levels of students. And I think there's probably a lot of people here that use Teams, right? Already in your classrooms. So I'm hoping that you'll interact and share what you've learned and what you do throughout the session. So it's not just like lecture and we'll do questions, Q&A at the end. I hope you all feel free to talk, unmute, use chat, and contribute that way. And thank you for keeping your cameras on. So agenda for today, brief introduction. We're actually going to do a team exercise. So we're going to start with that. Then we're going to talk about the benefits of using Teams and some of the challenges, how to design the team experience so that it will work well. The issue of social loafing, when you have people on a team and not everybody pulls their weight, that's a classic issue that we all deal with. And then that leads up to what the topic is about, which is how to assess teams. And I do have a handout at the end. So with the exception of one item, you will have links to everything that we covered and examples. So don't worry if you are a note taker. If we go too fast, you'll have everything, and I'll give you the link at the end. Okay, sound like a plan? Great. So, do you use Teams in your classroom? And would you say you're a frequent user, you use them a little bit, or you don't use them at all? And I'm just going to go around my screen. So there's random order here. So Yaling, would you say you frequently use Teams in your classes? Use them a little bit or not at all?
I use a lot, especially for tourism and hospitality classes, because I also teach some gen ed, like bigger class,
Okay.
and I don't use Team that much for those classes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Jonathan, how about you?
Total frequent Team user, all of my classes.
Okay. And Tony?
Yes, I use Team for project. So I have one big project in my class. So maybe I can say I'm a frequent user.
Okay. And Elizabeth?
So the classes I teach are both our internship and our actual restaurant class. So they're both applied learning experiences. So I don't use Teams at all.
Okay, fine. Yeah, it's hard to do that in an internship class, right? That's really independent. Janine, how about you?
I do. I teach business administration and hospitality management, and I use them in both programs. And I use cumulative assignments as group projects, and then they do a semester-long project and like put all the pieces together and do a big presentation at the end. So I
Okay.
love group projects.
Great. It sounds like you have them all very well designed. Yeah. Jennifer, how about you?
Yeah. I'm going to say 50-50. Depends on the class, because some classes, and also the size of the class, but I'm going to say 50-50.
Okay. And Michael, how about you and your parrot? Oh, I think you're on mute.
All right, good morning.
Good morning.
Scout and I, we use Teams in my human resource management class. My students complete a semester-long podcast project, so they're embedded in Teams there.
Okay.
Sheryl, but I want you to convince me to keep Teams because, I've been doing this for about 4 years and it's starting to give me grayer hairs.
I don't see anything.
Okay. But yeah, so I'd say I'm a frequent
Okay.
user, but I go in and out because I really question sometimes the value of it.
Okay. So they don't always work well, right? There are
Right.
challenges. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Miguel, good morning. How about you? Do you use Teams?
Yes, I do use Teams. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Yes, not very often, but sometimes.
Okay. And Maureen, how about you? know if she's with us or not.
Sorry, I was muted.
Oh, that's okay.
Similar to Michael, I've become disillusioned by semester-long group projects, but I do very frequent small group activities in class. Sometimes I'll keep a team together for a couple of class sessions so that, you know, in a shorter period of time, they can work together.
Okay. And sounds like some of you use them because of the projects you have, like podcasting. Some of you use them for, does anybody use them because you have a large class? I heard you don't use them in large classes. Is there any, you know, like why do you use, some of you give me some examples. Why do we use Teams?
All right, I'll jump in.
Okay.
John,
and
you were
then
gonna go?
Jonathan.
Go ahead,
Jonathan.
Michael and then
Michael.
Jonathan.
I can go after you, Michael. Go ahead.
I mean, I do it because I think having this podcast project breathes some life into the class. And I believe that in my HR class, the goal is not just to teach some fundamentals of HR, but also some of the transferable skills of working in groups. So despite, the gray hairs and the agony of teams, I do believe that it helps to enhance the quality in the classroom, just bringing some things to life. And and it helps to build some transferable skills if done right.
Okay. So it's not automatically successful. Sometimes it doesn't work well. Good. Jonathan?
In the classes that I teach, many of them have real life clients, and I find that by having the students work in teams, they can get theoretically more work done to cover ground that they need to in order to present in only a semester's time back to the client. And so it's been very useful in that sense. The other reason I like teams is that coming from a background in industry for most of my career, I find that you are needing to work in teams more and more and more. And I feel like it's a skill set that the students really need to leave with. But I share Michael's gray hairs on it. It's like trying to keep a boat steady in choppy water sometimes. And Michael, just as an aside, I'd love to talk with you offline about your podcast project because I'm introducing a podcast into a class project next semester in the fall, and I'd love to learn from your experience.
Oh, Michael, you're on mute.
Why don't we connect with the Zoom?
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Cool.
All right, cool. So we've heard there are some challenges, right? A lot's out of our control. You know, we hand over the learning to the student. And what we're going to do next is delve into those challenges a little bit more. So we're going to team up and we're going to do a journey map. And what you're going to do is I'm going to put you into teams. You're each going to introduce yourselves, share your role. You know, where do you work? What do you teach? What unique strategy do you use? And what are your expectations of learning about team assessment? So what do you want to get out of what we're talking about today? And then we're going to go on a journey and build consensus and report back to class. So what is our journey about? We're going to create a journey map from the island of isolation, which is dark and dreary and lonely, to Teamwork Treasure Island. And your team is going to discuss some things and share. So what you're going to discuss is what are at least 3 obstacles or challenges in teamwork in general. And you can also talk about what are the challenges in assessing teams. And then what are some tools or strategies you use along the way to be successful in your teams? Like, how do you do the teamwork? And make sure that each participant in your group gives at least 1 obstacle or 1 tool. So if you don't use teams in your classroom, think about when you've been in a team or have done teamwork. What's an obstacle and what are some tools for success? So any questions about this? before we go into our teams. Hello, Dr. Mayo. All right, you ready? And you'll notice it's a puzzle piece to go from here to there. So although it might be straight, we have to figure this out. So while you're doing this, after you brainstorm, you're going to select what you're going to share from your team amongst all of us. So you're going to come up with a group of obstacles and a group of strategies, and then you need to decide what strategy do you want to share and what obstacle do you want to share. And there's going to be a handout sheet that has all these instructions on it that you're going to copy. And I would recommend that one person on your team copy this. And you can decide who does that. I'm going to put that in the chat. So when you get in your teams, and Michael asked if the picture was created by AI. Absolutely. I am not talented at all in that area. So you now have the document that you can download to work in your teams. And we're going to set up, I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm going to set you up in teams, and I'm going to divide you. Let's see how many people we have here now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I'm going to, yes, Miguel.
The Google Doc that it's not open. So you have to log in into Google.
You can't just link and you can't just press on a link and make a copy.
I did.
Yeah,
It
I made a
worked.
copy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was not able to access. It says you need to log in into Google.
Google.
Yeah.
So someone on your team will hopefully be able to copy it, because you only need one copy per team. Your
Sure.
team will share. So don't
Sure.
worry, you'll be okay. All right. So I'm going to give you a number, and then you're going to put yourself into the team of that number. So ready? Yaling, you're 1. Jonathan, 2. Janine, 3. Miguel, 1. Fred, 2. Tony, 3. Jennifer, 1. Elizabeth, 2. Michael, 3. And Maureen, 1. And now I'm going to open up the teams. And you will be able to put yourself into the team room for the number I gave you. And if you have any issues, I can help you with that. You have 10 minutes to work in your teams, and then we're all I'm going to close the teams and we'll come back and report out. Any questions? All right, ready? Go ahead and join. You should be able to join either.
Hello.
Good morning.
Your
I'm
camera.
on an iPad, so I'm gonna rely on one of you to do the Google Doc.
Okay. Well, I downloaded it, so I can do it.
Sounds good. So
Okay.
we have three of us.
I guess so. Oh, yeah, I guess so, because it looks like Michael disappeared.
All right.
All right. So the first thing here says introduce ourselves, share roles, responsibilities, unique teaching strategy that you use, and expectations for learning about team assessment. So, well, I'll just start since I'm talking. Obviously, Jennifer Ahrens, hospitality tourism, also esports management, I teach. A unique teaching strategy for teams, I guess, would be, well, now I have to think.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, that's hard. I mean, my expectations I can talk about, because part of the expectations are, I think like Michael said, communication. First of all, I think they need to be social because I think the students have forgotten how to be social. So
What was your biggest challenge that you decided for
biggest
teamwork?
challenge was that when we put them in groups, the students tend to assign each person in the group a piece of the project, and then they end up working individually anyway. So it takes away from the group aspect of it.
I love it. Like the goal of putting them in the groups is to be collaborative and communicate. And then what they decide to do is do their own thing. And that is a typical, I think many of us have seen that and experienced that. Excellent. And team three, Janine, Michael, Tony, what was your biggest challenge? And then what was your best solution or best tool?
You want me to go? Who wants to go? Want me to go?
Go ahead.
Michael? Okay. So I think our goal was really to achieve an overall higher quality of work in their submission. A challenge that we came across was the students leaning on their teammates a little bit too much, like maybe not pulling their weight. So we talked about maybe creating smaller groups, making sure it's an inclusive environment for everyone. So maybe using more team building activities so everyone feels more comfortable, you know, with their group. What else did we talk about, Tony? Oh, it's using smaller individual assignments that may lead up to that group assignment. So everyone
break it
sort of
down.
has accountability to do their share before, and this was Michael's idea, is to make sure they have to do a part before they get thrown into that group project, which was really good, Michael. That was good. What else, Tony? Allowing more time by starting earlier and integrating pieces throughout the course.
So not just doing it all at once, but
Not all at
integrating it.
once, right? So it's not
All
so
right,
much
great.
pressure. And we talked
Can I-
about like
Can I
building
ask,
soft skills.
Janine, can I ask a question about that?
Sure, yes.
What do you mean by earlier? I mean, if we give the assignment in week 2 of a semester, you can't get much earlier because they got to have for some stuff the subject and the topic and the whatever, right?
Well, I think they just meant not doing it like throwing it all in them late, like mid to late semester where you give them the
Okay, gotcha.
assignment and then have
Right.
them do it really quick, right? So maybe introducing it, right, Michael and Tony?
Yeah.
Introducing it and then maybe just reinforcing it and working on it throughout the semester.
And
See,
then some
Fred, I had a problem of introducing group projects, you know, final month of the project. Sorry, final month of the semester.
It's too
And
late.
it's way too late. So I
Mhm.
find, hey, starting at group, week 2 or 3 and integrating it throughout the semester, much better. Like I've had such fails with the end of the semester projects, but integrating it throughout is much more successful.
So
And
you,
when I teach the group thesis project at NYU, they chose their groups and their topic on day 1. And on
Mhm.
day 2, they did a presentation immediately of what their problems and challenges were going to be. So they had to do a ton of work in the first week, but they did 4 presentations by the time they finished the semester. So they got used to having to meet deadlines all along. And they didn't worry about my approval, but they didn't want to look stupid in front of their colleagues that they couldn't answer questions or,
yeah,
So I
you
think
set
you're
it up
absolutely right, Michael. Early is better.
and you set it up so there's accountability. So what I'd like to do, because I actually visited your teams and you were having great conversations and had some really good strategies. I want to sort of continue the discussion around some topics. And we can continue to share. But it's clear to me that we do want to use teams in our classrooms. This is not something, although we have challenges, it's not challenging enough that we don't want to use teams or we choose not to use teams. And this is based on research. There are clear benefits to using teams, and many of you have mentioned this. First of all, team skills in the workplace, right? I think Jonathan talked about that. You worked in industry, most of us have. We're all in teams. And by working in teams, you do improve communication skills and interpersonal skills. You actually do promote, through research, we promote favorable academic accomplishments and outcomes. It's a good thing. It also, I don't know if I've heard this from your groups, but maybe discussed it. Grade competition can get in the way of learning. And by working in teams, they've shown in research that some students are less concerned about competing for the top grade. And then in collaborative situations, students have greater knowledge acquisition, retention of material, and higher order problem solving and reasoning abilities. So I think I heard Michael say in your group, it takes time, right? When we do these team exercises, it takes time, maybe time away from what we're trying to get them to learn. But research has shown it develops those skills, which are very important, not just for academia, but in the classroom. But there's a tension there, right? How are we going to spend our time? I'd like to focus our attention on setting up our teams for success. And I heard a lot of great strategies. And I want you to think about it like a golf swing. I don't know if we have any golfers here, but I'm taking golf lessons now. And I used to play wiffle ball on the beach. Jennifer, I don't know if you did that growing up down at the beach. And it used to be you try to swing as hard as you can. And then when I started to play golf, I thought, I'm going to swing as hard as I can. Well, that was not too successful. So in order to hit the ball where you want it to go, what's important is your stance, the setup. And even mentally, is your mind in the right spot? So to set up your teams to assess them, you have to get the stance right. You have to, as we've talked about, work on the early work and establish criteria for success. And then you'll hit your target, which is, for us faculty, whatever the task was we wanted the team to do. So from research, this is what they say you need to do to set up your teams for success. First of all, the faculty need to create teams. And I heard in one of the groups, you let the team select the students select their own teams. And that's been shown not to be a good idea. Because what happens? Well, birds of a feather flock together, right? I'm a white guy, I'm going to find other white guys to be with. Or if I'm an international student, maybe nobody picks me because I don't know anybody. So all that is eliminated if you can create your own teams, and you do it with diversity in mind. You can do it by setting up diversity in skills, which is what I did for you, right? I don't know if you noticed, I asked you, what is your experience with teams? And I actually divided up people who use teams a lot with people that don't use teams much, because we can learn from each other. And size matters. The size of the team matters. And some of you talked about that. Have any of you heard of the Amazon pizza effect? So Jeff Bezos, who spent a lot of time thinking about how to keep people out of meetings and who should be in meetings. And the Amazon pizza effect, according to Jeff Bezos, is no team should be larger than what it takes for 2 pizzas to feed. So if you order 2 pizzas, the team should not be any larger than to be fed by 2 pizzas. And I would say for classrooms, it's 1 pizza. And we'll talk more about that.
Yeah.
And some of you talked about they all work independently in the team, which is not what we want to do. So what we need to do as faculty is create assignments that actually intentionally promote interaction. So you can assign tasks to students, but require consensus. So do you notice what I did with your team activity? Did you all have a task to do, but were you required to build a consensus? And what was the consensus that I had you do? And by the way, you all really functioned really well when I was listening in. But what was the consensus piece of the assignment?
Cheryl, I think the consensus piece was after we had all of our conversations. Okay, like we came up with several challenges, and then the consensus was, okay, I read back all of the ones we came up with. Well, which one do we want to present?
Exactly. And I didn't assign you roles. And did you notice how we started out? It's like, well, who's going to take notes? Well, who's going to download? Well, who's going to speak? So we're going to talk more about assigning what we call process roles, which will make your team more efficient. And there's a lot of literature that says, don't change your teams. Create one team, leave it throughout the semester. And there can be issues with that, right? What if my team sucks, right? I'm on a bad team. And I do hear pros and cons with that, but we do know just through the literature, people should be on one team throughout the semester. And then as faculty, if you want the teams to work, we have to hold individuals accountable and set expectations. A number of you talked about making clear goals. What's the outcome? What are they reporting out? But I think Fred talked about this. Call on individuals to report back in class. You have them present right away, right? And then everybody can see who's involved. And you can create a team charter or contract. I think, Jonathan, you've used that. Does it work well?
It does, and I feel like it also gives me documentation to go back to with the team, because this is something that they all, it's one contract or one agreement that they
For
all,
the whole team.
and so there's some element of documentation of their accountability. The other thing
Exactly.
I also, in the classroom, I'd say every 3 weeks or so, we have team updates, and each team reports in front of the others as well, their progress to date since the last time we did the team update. And that's been a helpful mechanism as well, because I can also course correct if you
need to.
Yeah, if they're drifting.
Yeah. Or if somebody's not doing work and they've got an issue. And then, of course, always using rubrics is helpful for accountability. And I have examples for you for that. When you're working with a team experience, there's the task piece and the process piece. The task is the assignment. The process, sometimes we call this team dynamics, but it's basically how the team works together. And you actually need to do both to have successful teamwork. You can't just have them focus on the task. So the assignment itself must be clearly defined, and we need to explain the outcomes ahead of time very clearly. We need to frame the questions for them. And I have an example that you can see where I share that, how that works. But it's a good idea to say, these are the objectives, so that everybody can go back to that and say, oh, that's what we're supposed to do. I think it should be coming up so you can see it. And then clearly list, what are the outcomes? So there's no question. They're not spending time talking about that, and describe the assignment details. And then, of course, have a rubric. Can you see this sheet? Did it come up? Okay. Okay. Are any of you familiar with Tuckman's stages of group development? So some of you are. So what Tuckman says is that groups go through stages. The forming stage, getting to know each other. Then they have to fight. They have to have tension in order to normalize how they work together. Who does what role? How are we going to communicate? And then perform the outcome, the task. And then there's also a piece where we have to say goodbye. It's the end. And groups, a lot of people think this is just a straight line. It's not. They can go forming into storming. They get scared. They go back to forming. But because of a group development process, this is why the literature says keep one team throughout the semester. And in fact, that's not actually long enough for them to really truly leave the forming stage. Some groups do, some don't. It's also not good to add people in later or take people out, but we know sometimes that happens. And if you want to read more about that, there's a link. You can assign process roles. So task roles might be in our team assignment about hotel management. Jonathan, you're the general manager. Janine, you're the sales manager. Fred, you're the chef. Miguel, you're going to be the front desk manager, and then you're assigned a project. Those are task roles. Process roles are where people are responsible for maintaining how the group works together. And I find these are roles that I've used that work really well. And with all my team projects, they might have an assignment where they are assigned a task role or not, but they're always assigned a process role. So the facilitator's job is to make sure, did everybody participate? So let's say Maureen is a shy person and is a reflective learner, and she doesn't like to talk in groups. And let's say Fred is an extrovert, maybe, and he likes to talk, but he talks a lot. The facilitator will make sure they'll say, Fred, thank you for sharing. Let's go around and make sure everybody else has a turn. You'll notice the way I designed your group exercise. Everybody had to share at least one thing. Well, the facilitator would make sure they do that. The recorder takes notes. The spokesperson speaks. Timekeeper not only keeps the time, you have 10 minutes. Oh, we've got 5 minutes left, 3 minutes left, but they also coordinate when we meet. And the reality checker is the person who makes sure, did we do the assignment? So these are, I think, process roles, and you might try to use them in your teams to see if it makes it work more efficiently. Has anybody done process roles? Okay, any comments, thoughts on it? Jonathan or Fred?
I think it's very, very, very useful. And I think also just the act of assigning the roles, or not assigning the roles, but telling them that they have to have these roles fulfilled and letting us know who they are has been a very important improvement.
I found
Sheryl,
undergraduates more willing to take on these roles, and graduate students felt they didn't need it.
Okay, interesting.
Sheryl, I did try this really successfully last semester. And it was something right along these lines. And I actually gave them a gradable assignment as a group where they had to identify their roles.
Excellent.
And so this way they all had it, like they'd all committed to a document, they all had it. And I really saw an improvement in the final product of the project that they did.
And that is supported in research as well. If you assign the process roles and they get their process down, the task will usually be better. So you've experienced that.
Sheryl,
The
in my
other thing I
intro to-
do is I rotate the roles, so I don't always have the same speaker. So I'm sorry, Janine?
That's okay. In my intro to business class, we create a semester-long business. They create then as a group, and I assign the roles as the GM, the finance manager, the HR manager, and the what's the other one? Marketing manager. So at the end of class, I usually have the GM manager. The students go to leave the class on our first week, and one student turned and said, Professor, I'm the GM. So it really empowers them. My attendance is 99% like every week.
Wow.
I mean, because they have these roles and they feel committed and to be held accountable for their role in the group. So it really works, and they feel really like they take on this role. It's amazing.
And they own
Very
it.
empowering.
Yeah. And so what you're describing are task roles. And that sounds like to me your students really internalize it.
They really do.
Yeah, that's awesome. So we all talked about social loafing, the problem where someone hides, right? You've got a group, not everybody's doing the work. It's real interesting research has been done on this. And actually about 120 years ago, Ringelmann didn't call it social loafing, but he did an experiment. And what he did is he looked at tug of war, and he actually measured how people pull in a tug of war. And he determined that people pull about 50 pounds per person. And what he found is when he added more people onto the rope, it wasn't the same amount of pull that everybody did. Some people pulled 50 pounds, some people eased up. Well, what's going on here? Well, he determined that there's a decrease of individual motivation on group tasks the more people are in the group, and that individual efforts decrease as the size, it's inversely to the size of the group. So then he thought, well, what if I blindfolded people? What if you didn't know how many people were pulling on the rope? He wanted to look at group effort. Was it compounded by coordinated effort? But if you don't know who else is pulling, you won't pull less or more. Well, guess what happened? As the group increased in size and people didn't know it, some people pulled less. So that's not true. What it says is we have to be mindful of the size of our groups, and we have to do things to avoid social loafing. And social loafing was actually coined by Latane, Williams, and Harkin in 1979. And there have been hundreds of papers about this problem. So although we know about it, it's still with us, and we have to do things when we design our group to make sure we don't have social loafing. So what can you do? Research says ideal size of groups are 3 to 5. Don't go larger than 5. That's your one pizza, right? And the instructor is consistently associated with identifiableness to reduce social loafing. What that means is if you know what your students are doing and you can identify and they know that, they're less likely to social loaf. Peer evaluation systems work, but they're not perfect. And the literature supports that. And it can be formal, like some of you talked about. You had forums that people filled out. Fred, you have very detailed accountability. But Janine, what you did with they embrace their roles, that was less formal.
Sheryl,
Both can work. Yeah.
Sheryl, can you go back to that? I didn't understand the instructors. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The instructors consistently associated. Could you explain that bullet one more time? I just didn't quite follow that.
Absolutely. And I actually took the wording from the paper, so it's probably could have been written more clearly. What that means is that you know what the teams are doing. And I think Jonathan and Fred, you spaced it out throughout the semester. So let's say you do a check-in, Jonathan, with your teams, and you notice Sheryl didn't say a word, looked disconnected from the group, and the group's not referring to her at all. So now it's real clear to you that Sheryl is probably social loafing. And Fred, when your teams present, if one person is doing all the talking and the rest of the team, or, 2 people are doing all the talking, you now can have a window into, is there social loafing going on? You as an instructor should stop by the group and say, hey, how's the process going? Do you feel everybody's working well together?
Jonathan, one thing that I do, which might be helpful for you, is when they're doing a presentation, each person picks their thing. I say that when you're doing a presentation, I have the right to interrupt anyone in the middle of a sentence and call on someone else on that group to finish that sentence and that part of it. So there's no social loafing, because if they're loafing, they're caught, and they're caught really vulnerable and naked in front of their peers. And so I say, okay, so Maureen, you don't know what this is about. You did your piece, but not the rest of the piece. Can anyone else fill in for Maureen? So pretty soon they stop social loafing and everyone practices everyone's speech, and then it flows beautifully. By the end of the semester, they really got it.
That's a really interesting technique. Thank you.
They don't like it, but I'm very clear that why I do it is because the same thing we do in the industry. We practice and practice before we present.
Really, and that's a great example. Yeah. So define, if you want to assess teams successfully, wrap up. It's important to have very clear objectives. And I think you all recognize that in your experience. It's important to designing specific roles, whether it's task roles like Janine pointed out, or process roles. And you can use contracts. And I have an example of a contract for you. And again, as Jonathan said, they create the contract, they sign it, it's their contract. You can go back to that and say, how are we doing? Are we accountable to our contract? Use rubrics. We all know rubrics. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I apologize, Sheryl. I don't know if you'll agree with this or not. I was really deliberate in calling it an agreement and not a contract.
Not contract.
I know that's a semantic thing, but they're all agreeing to it. And I felt like I want you to agree to something as opposed to feeling contractually bound by it.
I've used both, and I used the word contract when it was in a lodging management class when we have contracts, but I've used it in HR, and it's a team. I didn't call it I remember what I called it, but I didn't call it a contract. It was like how we agree to work together. So it was like an agreement.
You can do it as an MOU too.
Yeah. But you're right, what you call it matters. Rubrics, really important. I'm going to give you 3 rubrics for the process piece, but it allows for transparency. And again, you would put those process skills in the rubric, not necessarily the task skills. How do we work together? Do we communicate? How do we problem solve? Do we make deadlines? Peer evaluations are really important. Have them evaluate each other. Self-assessments. I don't know if anybody does this, but you can actually ask students to submit a reflective paper about how they worked on the team. And you could do it in the middle and you can do it at the end. And you can say it's confidential and it's just for you to see. And I have an example to share with you of what I call a mini reflection paper, so that if someone's social loafing, or if someone says they're not working on the project, you can know about it. And each person is saying something about what they're doing. They're not commenting on others. I've used this. I find it effective, but it's hard to do in a large group because you're reading a lot of papers. And then this is what Fred was talking about. Monitoring team interactions. You can actually have them use a Google Doc to do all their work, and you can trace who wrote what and who contributed. And Canvas has a feature. Michael, have you done this? I don't know. I saw you light up there.
No, I have not.
Okay. And as Fred pointed out, you can assess them in the middle and ask one of the team members to talk. I have a spokesperson on the team. They go up to talk, and then we tag out. And then I say, okay, Miguel, you're the spokesperson. Now you need to continue the readout on the group. You're going to tag out the group member. He walks off stage, tags Jennifer. She walks up. And it is pretty clear whether people were paying attention and contributing. And you can also do feedback sessions. And I think, Jonathan, you talked about, could you explain, like, how do you do that in the middle of the semester?
Well, I think that it's really, I tie it into the every 3-week team updates that they provide. And I try to provide real-time feedback to the groups that I hope is constructive to them. And if they're stuck on something, I try to help loosen that up.
Are they stuck on the task, or is it sometimes how they're working together, or both?
Usually they'll publicly admit to being stuck on a task as opposed to dysfunction.
Yeah. And again, when you evaluate them on the task, the grade for the job, but you can also evaluate them on the process. And great teamwork has both good assessments on their task and good assessments on their process. And what is your biggest takeaway from today? We'll do a popcorn, whoever wants to say something you learned or something confirmed what you're doing.
It sounds like teams are definitely, although as Michael said, causes the gray hair, that the view still may be worth the climb. That it's a workout sometimes, but that ultimately the students are gaining benefit from it, even when there may be some bumps in the road.
Not perfect, but worth it. Great. Miguel.
The process of assigning process roles, I thought it was very relevant, and I don't always consistently do that. I want to do that, and I know exactly when I'm going to do that now. And with in-class time updates, I thought that was very interesting twist on that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We have time for one more person to share because we're just slightly over. Anybody else?
I'll say I really appreciated the suggestion about that Fred provided about providing opportunity to give presentations throughout leading up. So it's not just one big culmination at the end and a big presentation. I thought that was really valuable.
Excellent.
I apologize. I do have to jump.
Yeah, thank you.
Will resources be available? How will we?
Right now, I'm going to put it in chat. So it'll get there before you go.
Thank you. This was a great session. Thank you, Sheryl,
you all.
facilitating.
Yeah, we ran out of time, but you guys had great contributions, and I'm going to put the link in chat right now. So all the things I referred to, much more articles, examples, you can take and play with. And thank you again for the opportunity to just share what I do, but really for me, to hear what all of you do. You should be able to see it in chat. Make sure you click on it so you get it before the meeting ends. I always forget to do that and then it disappears.
Perfect.
And it was great to see everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cheryl, and thank you everybody for joining us. And we have more Rise and Grind in March and April, so hopefully to see you all. So yeah, like Cheryl said, download the material before I close out this meeting.
Thank
Right.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
So
you. Good to see everybody.
Good to see you, Gal, and have a nice weekend.
Yeah, thanks, Yao-Ling, for organizing.
No problem.
Bye.
Bye.